제 전부 저던 힘이죠. 오늘 뭐는 전부 가게다 알고리즘 전도 실물도 또 나도 제잖아 기존 사람의 저러 저기 장근서 저거 특히选了 연락만 이제 본조장로 소란 공개 도반 보러 신지로 우상산산.
The supreme, profound, and sublime Dharma is difficult to encounter in a billion eons. Now I see it, hear it, receive it, and kept it. I vow to attain the true meaning of the Tathagata. In order to liberate all sentient beings, let us generate supreme bodhicitta.
Let's look at the teaching, the fifth lecture on the flight of the Garuda. On the morning of July the 4th, Ponzo Rinpoche give the teaching, and then in the afternoon, I think there is a session of granting blessings. In the past 2 days, Ponzo Rinpoche had given the classes both the morning and afternoon, but on the 4th, Rinpoche only gave teachings in the morning. So Rinpoche began with the Emaho. Once again, noble children, listen well. In this way, when you have maintained the view without distraction, then later, even if you completely let go and leave things as they naturally are, there will be no coming or going from the true state. To the last verse of the text, by its virtue may many fortunate disciples swiftly purify the stains of ignorance, kleshas, and concepts into the original space of primordial purity and attain fruition in this very life. In the end, Choji concluded the teaching with the following words. Yesterday, since you have already received the oral transmission, that's really wonderful. Well, you have received the oral transmission of the tractual part. Initially, I told him to give both the tractual and the togo as well, which would uptake about 2 hours. But yesterday, I'm not sure if it's because you didn't request the oral transmission of both. Is it that you didn't make the appropriate requests for Khenpo to give you the oral transmission? He completed it within 40-something minutes. It would be the best to receive the entire oral transmission. Did you just pick one? Only the tractual part, not the togo part? The Khenpos and Khenmos, and many of you, it seems that you don't listen properly. The Khenpos and Khenmos, the management, and all of that. Either you listen to their teachings, or you should. And if you want to listen, you should listen to the entire message, not just a section of it. I'm not sure if it's your fault of not receiving the entire oral transmission, or if the Khenpo didn't understand my request. Is it because the Khenpo only wanted to give you the tractual part but not the togo part? Maybe because he's too stingy to give you the oral transmission of the togo part? But that couldn't be true, because I asked him to give the oral transmission and planned this oral transmission for an entire 2 hours. I asked him whether he needed 3 hours to finish reading the entire text. He said no, he just needed 2. I'm not scolding you right now, but I'm just saying that when you listen to the teachings and when you listen to the instructions, you should write down notes. Without having notes, your memory retention is not enough to sustain the information. Especially by the second day, you will probably forget the majority of the information, or at least a partial of the information. It is possible that you have already neglected a part of the instructions. So let it be from the Khenpos and Khenmos or from anyone else. I think it would be the best for you to write down in words. It is said that a small nib is better than a great memory. Did I say that right? So I think it's better to have good notes. Also, when I look at this book, I really appreciate having notes around me and to have those habits of writing down notes back then. So yesterday, I think it is quite a shame for you not to be able to receive the entire oral transmission. Though Ponso Rinpoche only had given the tractual part of the oral transmission, but not the Togo, but that is only because of the time constraint. Back in 2019, on the 5th of September, we also studied this text, and we completed on the 25th of October. I had already given the text of the flight of the Garuda, only had given the tractual part of the teaching, and the Togo part of the transmission. I think it would be convenient for you to receive the teaching of the Togo part as well. But we'll see if you will have another opportunity later. Ponso Rinpoche said also that we have spent more than 10 hours on this teaching. The main purpose for me to teach you this text is to enhance your experience and realize the nature of mind. And by doing so, I can purify the defilement of my speech as well. Lama Gathar, Lama Gathar, who had passed away, when he received the teaching from Ponso Rinpoche, he said that, oh, today we studied the flight of an eagle, because he couldn't remember it was the Garuda. Or in Tibetan, in fact, he didn't say eagle, he said the flight of the vulture, because in Tibetan culture, the vulture are the ones that devours the corpse of people during the sky burial. So the way he said it was the flight of vulture, when he was showing off to the others and saying that, oh, Ponso Rinpoche is giving us this profound teaching of the flight of the vulture. Ponso Rinpoche said that today is the 5th lecture, and the teaching had been given, and the time that I spend on giving you this teaching are more than 10 hours. This center is a bit different because this is a practice center, so Ponso Rinpoche was able to give him longer teachings rather than having being bound by the time. And then he continued to say that this is for you to enhance your experience and realization on top of the practitioners who had already built a very good foundation. Also, he said that he can purify defilements of his speech as well. So when it comes to giving Dharma teachings, not only you can benefit others, you can also purify your own speech too. The young practitioners as well as the senior practitioners, whenever you have the opportunity, I think you should try your best to give Dharma teachings. It could really help you to purify your own speech. Ponso Rinpoche then continued to say that at this time I have explained every verse and sentence in the text without adding or reducing anything. Also, I have summarized and offered all the key points of this teaching to you. Well, we'll see later if we can make this teaching into a book. Let's see if we have such an opportunity. This text explains the clear light, great perfection, also included the key points of other paths like Mahamudra and the Great Middle Way. He purposely said that, and let's see how he ties the great perfection, Mahamudra, and the Great Middle Way into the later part of his teaching. He said that generally speaking, of all the infinite doctrines taught by the Buddha, the ultimate essentials are encompassed classes are encompassed in the three paths of the Great Middle Way, the Great Seal, and the Great Perfection. If you follow the path of the Great Middle Way in a complete and correct manner, the key points of the Great Seal and the Great Perfection will be implemented in your practice as well. Likewise, when you practice Mahamudra or Dzogchen, as long as your practice is authentic, accurate, and complete, the essentials of the other two paths will have been applied in your practice. Therefore, it is pivotal to practice Mahamudra, Dzogchen, and the Great Middle Way simultaneously. Many realized masters such of Kagyu and Nyingma lineage, such as the third Karmapa Ranjun Dorje and omniscient Longchenpa, engage in their practice by following this method. We, teachers and disciples, should also combine the three paths into one in our daily study and practice. It is of great significance. When Pongsu Rinpoche went to Bhutan, he also explained in such a way that the Mahamudra, the practitioners of Mahamudra usually place great importance in the practice. So over here he says that we should try to combine all the three, the Mahamudra, the Madhyamika, and the Mahaati all together into one in the daily study and practice. How should one engage in such practice and combine the three paths as one? Sustain the state of calm abiding, the aspect of mind that is free from any movement, is Mahamudra. On one hand, Mahamudra, Mahaati, and Madhyamika can be considered as the teachings of the Dharma doctrines. However, over here, Pongsu Rinpoche stated the three as the states of realization. Now, this part is really crucial. So the state of calm abiding is that aspect of the mind is Mahamudra. The mind cannot be found anywhere, either inside, outside, or in between. Such emptiness of the mind is a great middle way. While abiding single-pointedly in emptiness, ascertain that the mind's nature is lucid, clear, pristine awareness. Gaining certainty in this, gaining certainty in this is the great perfection. I have already got the audio recording of this teaching as well as the translation as well. I did the transcript of the Tibetan version, and then I translated from Tibetan into Chinese. But because we also kept the English translation of the teaching, so I thought that maybe the English translation that is translated by Sanjay Khandro can directly be transcribed and then used in this book. However, the oral interpreting has rather a different standard than the written translation. For that reason, we had to just use Sanjay Khandro's translation as a reference and then translate from both Tibetan and Chinese into English. The other day when I scolded the English team for not translating fast enough, then they told me that they had to retranslate many of the recordings. So I thought to myself that, okay, they're not that slow. They're rather quite fast, because for this particular teaching, it is not going to be translated. It is not easy to translate this whole text in such a short period of time. And later we will have French and Japanese available later as well. We'll see that I think all the translators who work for this project, they also have auspicious connections to Pongsu Rinpoche and to this project. We know that our translation has rather a different standard than written translation. Some of the audios were brought back by me, and some of those audios and videos were then later collected by other members of this project. The Tibetan editorial group as well as the English all worked very hard. I myself also worked really hard on this project. I spent quite a bit of effort and time, and that is why people told me that because I spent too much effort on this project, that is how I got ill. But if I were to get ill because of the effort I spent on Ponso Rinpoche's project, I think it's well worth it. In the aspiration of Mahamudra of definitive meaning, the third Karmapa Rendran Dorje said the absence of mental engagement is Mahamudra, the freedom from extremes is the great middle way. Since all is included here, this too is a great perfection. The third Karmapa is the head of Kagyu. So quoting from the head of Kagyu to the Kagyu practitioners, Ponso Rinpoche truly used the quotation really well. Quoting from Karmapa himself, absence of mental engagement is Mahamudra, and freedom from extremes is a great middle way. And then since all is included here, this too is the great perfection. And that is how he pointed out that if one were to attain great perfection, then one realized both Mahamudra and Mahamadhyamika. Now, what does it mean by this quotation? This citation means that being free from discernment and attachment is the great seal. Going beyond all extremes is great middle way. And that which is perfectly included is the essentials of all paths. That is the great perfection. So parting from all the four extremes and the 8 elaborations, that is a great middle way. And then the essential of all paths is great perfection. So Ponso Rinpoche says that may all sentient beings and then Karmapa prayed for all sentient beings to realize this truth. And then Ponso Rinpoche continued to say that since I came to your center, I have been encouraging you again and again to practice the teaching of both Nyingma and Kagyu without any biased view or personal preferences. You should make such an aspiration and try as much as possible to create favorable conditions to actualize these two paths. And then Ponso Rinpoche said, thank you. And let's look at the next part. This man then had a conversation over here. So let's see this man with a beard. His name is Joshua Mulder. He is still at the stupa. He is 71 years old. You can see his photo. When he was building the stupa, I think he broke his leg, and that is why Gyatso Rinpoche was holding his arms. Gyatso Rinpoche is holding the arm of Trungpa Rinpoche, Ponso Rinpoche, and then the other arm holding Joshua Mulder. And then the other man standing here, this is the son of Trungpa Rinpoche, the Sakyong. And in the book of Lady Diana, she wrote about how the Sakyong also lived with them for a long period of time. When the Sakyong, when Trungpa Rinpoche passed into Parinirvana, many centers placed their hope onto the Sakyong, and then later there are different kinds of discrepancies. I heard that a group of the disciples are now following still the Shambhala Center, and then another group follows the Sakyong. And then there are different kinds of gossips and different kinds of conflicts. The Westerners, I think the Western practitioners, a group of them who are really persistent on the path, they still, after 30 years, they practice the same teachings given by their teachers. And then another group of students, however, there are another group of students who would sue their lamas and then created a various kinds of obstacles. That is why many teachers really wanted to teach in the West because the disciples have faith and they can persistently practice and so on. But nowadays, because of different kinds of incidents, including Sogyal Rinpoche and so on, the disciples not only do not repay the kindness of their lamas, that they would find faults of the teachers, especially if the disciples are close to the lamas, and especially if there are disciples with hidden agendas and so on, to try to find faults of the lamas, then in such a way it is quite disappointing. And I myself think that it is because of the cultural background or the kind of mindset is really lacking in the West. In the East, in Tibet, for example, not as many of such incidents would happen. Of course, there are rare incidents where the disciples would break the Samaya vows with their teachers, but I have never heard of any Tibetan students who would sue their lamas yet. Now in China, there are lamas, there are teachers. Well, if I were to speak of this, I am probably making some of you really upset. There are lamas who would say that, well, the Chinese are not reliable. I think that's very biased, and it's probably stereotyping a group of people, because there are reliable Chinese. That being said, many different areas has rather a very thin cultural background to lay the foundation of Dharma, for the student and teacher relationship. And without a good foundation, then to build a student and teacher relationship could be rather dangerous. So I think it would be good for the Dharma teachers to be vigilant. Do not receive offerings from disciples so easily and frivolously, because later it could end up not bringing any benefits to you. Well, recently there was news that a furniture store owner tried to blackmail a monk, but the monk is not completely pure either, so both of them ended up in prison. Many people warned me not to give the Vajrayana teachings to many people, but to me, I feel that if I do not give the Vajrayana teachings, many eligible disciples will not have the opportunity to receive it at all. But of course, at the first glimpse, there are people who may appear to be eligible and appear to have faith, but later you can never guarantee if they will maintain their samaya. In my life, there was a person who broke the vow. So in the future, it's very difficult to say if there will be one or two people who would break their vows. It's hard to say, but if I do not give the Vajrayana teachings, I'm sure there are people who will find various ways to still obtain the Vajrayana teachings. Well, sometimes I would also contemplate if one were to break the Samaya vow, it might be better for them to not receive the Vajrayana teachings to start off. In fact, every Dharma teacher, every monastic or lay practitioners, whenever it comes to having any kinds of monetary relationships with others, you have to be very careful, because maybe today they'll say that I'm making this offering to you, but after a while they will feel regret, and then they would start to tell others that this person took my money. In this way, things will turn into such an embarrassment to both sides. So the Dharma teachers and ourselves, whatever it may be, if it were to be some kinds of offering situations, you need to be very careful with it. Of course, I made such requirement to all of you. Do not make any monetary relationships to others. Do not receive the monetary offerings from the others. Because later you never know if it's going to create benefit or not. Phuntsukul Rinpoche, in his life, there was a person who broke the Samaya vow to Phuntsukul Rinpoche. That old man is still alive. It seems that his life is rather quite long, but he's quite infamous all throughout the world. It must be. Well, there was another one who's a monastic, but not many know who he was. When he really wanted to confess to Phuntsukul Rinpoche, but Phuntsukul Rinpoche didn't let him at all. However, to the Westerners, usually they would place great importance on law, because if one were to break the law, then they would suffer from consequences. But if one were to break Samaya, then for the Westerners, they would feel that this is something that would happen in the next life, but it is nothing related to now, so it is not practical. It seems that the Westerners place greater importance to the present benefits and fame or wealth and so on. So in some ways, a group of Westerners may appear to be very vigilant when it comes to practice, but when it comes to the future lifetimes, not many place great importance to it. They don't really care as much. So when it comes to the Dharma teachers, when you're famous, when you're well known, people will treat you with great respect. But when you lose whatever kinds of status and wealth and so on and fame, then people will disrespect you. And in a Chinese proverb, it is said that people will throw stones at that person who fell down into a well. How is it said?
然后这个是我刚才说是那个，所以我觉得呢，就是这个。就萨迦米帕姆的话呢，就是当时他语言比较少。
So the reason I'm speaking of it is that I remember that Sakyamipa Rinpoche at the time, he didn't speak much, and whenever Phuntsukul Rinpoche would walk and whenever he needed, then Sakyamipa would definitely be there to help Rinpoche. Other than that, he didn't speak much. So other than that interaction, I don't remember much. And then beside him, that person with a big beard usually follows Phuntsukul Rinpoche. He has great faith to Rinpoche. I can't remember his role back then, so that's my introduction to you about this photo. Now let's look at the book. Among American practitioners who received teachings from Yijinuru, many of them had also met many highly revered masters and received precious instructions from them. However, many disciples felt the effect of Choji had on them that was very special, that was then also remained unforgettable even after so many years. This practitioner named Joshua Mulder, who recalled this, everyone was shocked by the presence of His Holiness Jigme Phuntsukul Rinpoche. When he visited our Sangha, it had been 6 years since our root teacher Jigme Trungpa Rinpoche passed away, so everybody was in a state of lacking inspiration. Well, I think it is quite a true description. After a lama's passing, usually the disciples would lose inspiration and lose courage and motivation. However, when it comes to the passing of Phuntsukul Rinpoche at that time, we thought that maybe we will also lose inspiration, maybe we will also lose our motivation. However, it seems that we're still having meals and we're still having practitioners practicing here. When Ponzo Rinpoche came, it was astounding because his presence was a powerful proclamation that the practice is real. He was very definitive and energetic. So he was full of energy. There was an ancient, profound quality in him. You could see that he was thoroughly steeped and completely trained in the Dharma. Seeing him was like being in the Himalaya plateau, spacious and surrounded by mountains, as if you had arrived in a different realm. Someone else also described Ponzo Rinpoche in the same way, that Ponzo Rinpoche had steeped and trained completely in Dharma. Even by seeing him, you will be able to feel the power of Dharma. Sometimes Dharma teaching, in fact, is not about what you can say. Compared to lots of our Dharma teachers nowadays, they rely on the lips for their whole life. I myself, I can tell you stories and stories, but in classes, I try to make my language rather very concise and to the point. But if you were to ask me to just tell stories, I can go on and on. When I was at school, when I was in middle school, I can make up stories really quickly. And after telling the stories, my friends would ask me to tell them another story. So I'm very good at telling stories. But Ponzo Rinpoche is not relying on just teaching through his words. His presence is completely different, and he transported, it seems that he could transport all the audience into a different realm. He had a very strong presence of solidity, genuineness, pride, and human dignity. What benefited me most was that Choji validated the practice as being real. I started to practice Vajrayogini when I was at the age of 27. The Kagyu practitioners also practice the Vajrayogini, as we also practice Vajrayogini in our Guru Yoga. And Joshua continued to say that when I met Khenpo Rinpoche, I was 41. So by then, I had been visualizing myself as a Vajrayogini for 14 years. The moment I saw Rinpoche, my entire visualization became real. There was a solid human Vajrayogini sitting in front of me. He was Vajrayogini in person. When I translated this part into Tibetan language, the Tibetans were astounded by the level of realization of this Western practitioner. It's been very difficult for me to translate the Tibetan language into Chinese and then Chinese into Tibetan. I have to do it both ways. The Tibetans were astounded because after practicing for 14 years, when a realized master comes, his visualization of the deity completely becomes the guru, and the guru and the deity becomes non-dual. This realization has appeared. This practitioner is still alive, so and this particular writing and interview has been reread by themselves as well. At some point, when he was granting empowerment, he shouted out "Pat." At the end of the Shurangama Sutra, also there are lots of pat. And people among the audience saw him levitated off his throne. Well, I didn't see that, but maybe there are audiences who saw that. But people's karma is very different, so. that was like a direct experience of reality. It was a direct cutting through of the conceptual mind. When Ponsu Rinpoche was at Tashi Chiling and other places, Ponsu Rinpoche had different kinds of demonstrations. So he vividly demonstrated the ancient tradition from the land of snows in the land of America, and that is truly significant. To demonstrate that experience is truly significant. In United States, the material providings is quite abundant, but in terms of spiritual providing and abundance, this is really important as well. That's from his perspective.